The line outside the auditorium moves quickly, but when I hand over my ticket, the usher hesitates. She flips through her clipboard, checks my name, and shakes her head. "This one's already been scanned," she says. I tell her there must be a mistake. I haven't been inside. She looks past me and shrugs. "You can wait to the side if you want." So I wait. The sun is hot on the back of my neck. I shift my purse to the other shoulder. Inside it, carefully wrapped in tissue, is the sash I embroidered myself. Thomas's name stitched in deep green, along with the year and a tiny owl in the corner. He always liked owls when he was little. The doors open wider. Cameras click. Laughter floats out. And then I see him. Thomas walks through the entrance, back straight, chin lifted. On his arm is Beatrice. She's dressed in something pale and silky hair, pulled tight heels tapping with every step. They look like a picture from a brochure. He doesn't see me. Then he does. His eyes catch mine. 1 second, maybe less. He doesn't smile, doesn't stop, just moves his lips slow enough for me to understand. "You embarrass me." I don't say a word. My hand tightens around the fabric in my purse. The crowd cheers as they walk down the center aisle. People stand. Someone calls his name. My name is never called. No one asks where I am. No one looks back. I stay outside alone while applause echoes through the glass. From where I stand, I can't see the stage, but I can hear every name that isn't mine. I lower the sash back into my bag and let the door close quietly behind me. I found a small screen near the side entrance, mounted to the wall like an afterthought. The picture was grainy and the sound crackled, but I watched the ceremony anyway. Students walked across the stage, shaking hands, posing for photos. Names were read aloud in steady rhythm, none of them mine. Tomas stood tall when it was his turn. He smiled for the cameras. Beatrice was beside him again, holding his cap when he bowed slightly. Someone in the crowd shouted, "That's our boy." I don't know whose voice it was, but it wasn't mine. No one noticed me standing there. Not the woman handing out programs. Not the students brushing past. Not even Thomas when he looked toward the exits during intermission. I reached into my bag and pulled out the second ticket. The one I'd kept folded inside a book for years. I had always left room for the possibility that Thomas's father might show up, that he might call, that maybe, just maybe, he'd want to see the man our boy had become. He never did. I handed the ticket to the security guard and said, "Won't be needing this." He nodded, not even looking down. The ceremony stretched on. My legs ached, but I didn't sit. I stayed standing because it felt wrong to rest when I'd already been dismissed. When the last student left the stage, I turned and walked slowly out through the courtyard. The trees rustled overhead, their shadows long and wavering. I passed the bus stop, but didn't pause. The walk home was 5 miles, maybe more. I didn't mind. I needed the time. The watch was still in my coat pocket, nestled in its velvet box. I'd had it engraved. For every hour you thought I wasn't watching, I was. I never opened the box, just kept walking. The streets got quieter the farther I went. And when I reached my front steps, I stood there for a long moment before unlocking the door. The next morning, I opened my laptop like I always did, with tea in hand inbox, quiet, hoping for nothing in particular. I wasn't looking for the photos. They found me. Beatrice had posted them sometime during the night. There was Thomas in the middle, arms around his wife and her mother, all three smiling under the banner that said, "Class of 2025. The caption read, "Proud of the man we helped raise." Helped? Raised? I clicked the album. One photo after another. Tomas with Beatrice. Tomas with her extended family. Tomas holding his diploma, while Beatrice pretended to wipe away a tear. Her side of the family filled every frame. I kept scrolling. The comments came quickly. "You must be so proud, Beatrice. What a strong, supportive family. Thank you for helping him become who he is. Y'all made it happen. I didn't see my name. I didn't expect it by then. But some part of me still looked for it, still wanted one person to say, "Where's his mother?" No one did. I closed the browser and opened the local paper, hoping to distract myself. But there he was again, page 7, bottom corner. Local graduate earns honors. The same photo. Same smile. I set the paper on the kitchen table, left it there as I made breakfast. It sat beside my plate as I ate toast I couldn't taste. I used to imagine what this day would feel like. Years ago, I'd pictured family gathered around laughter in the house, Thomas saying, "Thank you," while I tried not to cry. Instead, it was me and that newspaper. Me and that caption. I put the paper away, folded it neatly, tucked it into the drawer, where I kept important things I didn't want to throw out, but didn't want to look at again either. Then I rinsed my plate, wiped down the table, and opened the drawer, where the sash still waited untouched. I used to tell myself it was just a phase, that every mother loses a little ground when her son grows up, when he builds his own life. But thinking back, the shift wasn't sudden. It had been happening in pieces quietly enough to ignore if I tried hard enough. Beatrice started showing up the year Thomas turned 22. First, it was just holiday dinners where she insisted he sit next to her. Then came the internships, the networking events she arranged. "Just a few people I know," she'd say. He'd thank her and look at me like I didn't understand the world he was trying to enter. His messages got shorter. Calls turned into missed texts. "Busy, sorry. Can't talk right now. Later. Always later." I remember one afternoon, I brought him lunch on campus, his favorite homemade tamales wrapped in a towel to stay warm. I waited outside his building, smiling when he came out, but his face changed the second he saw me. He glanced around and muttered, "Mom, don't do this again." He took the bag quickly and walked off, not even saying thank you. At the time, I told myself he was just overwhelmed. Finals stress. But it wasn't the first time. And it wouldn't be the last. Beatrice had money, sure, but it was more than that. She had presence. She stood with her shoulders back, wore shoes I couldn't pronounce, knew how to speak in a way that made people lean in. I didn't. I was the quiet mother, with calloused hands and clothes from clearance racks, who'd spent more time inside libraries than cocktail lounges. I couldn't compete, not in the world he was moving into. I went to the closet and pulled down the old box I'd hidden behind winter scarves. Inside, the watch still waited. I'd had it polished twice. The engraving glinted faintly through the tissue. I hadn't looked at it since the day before graduation. I held it for a long moment, then placed it gently back in its spot. The envelope was thin, tucked between a utility bill and a coupon flyer. At first, I thought it was a generic thank you letter, maybe a donation receipt. I nearly tossed it aside, but the return address caught my eye, Office of the Dean University Advancement. Inside was a single page, printed formal. "We would like to extend our gratitude for your continued support of student success." At the bottom, in neat handwriting, "Would you be willing to attend a recognition ceremony next week?" I reread the note twice before calling the number listed. A young voice answered, cheerful but rushed. I gave my name and asked carefully what this was about. "Let me check your file," she said. There was a pause, some keyboard clicking. Then, "Yes, Ms. Rennick. You're listed as the primary contributor on Thomas Calhoun's financial aid account. All 4 years." I stared at the kitchen counter. "I thought it was the Sanchez family," I murmured, not meaning to say it out loud. "No, ma'am," she said. "The funding is attributed to a faculty-linked scholarship account. It says here it was set up under your name, tied to a research award you won in 2004. The call ended politely. I sat down with the letter still in my hand. I had almost forgotten about that prize. It wasn't a large sum, but I'd used it to seed a small fund years ago. A librarian's quiet legacy, a line item on a spreadsheet no one ever cared to read. Until now. All those semesters, the money came out automatically. I didn't need applause. I only wanted Thomas to finish without debt, to walk across that stage with nothing hanging over him but a gown. But somehow, my silence had written me out of the story entirely. Beatrice stepped into the light while I faded from the page. I folded the letter, smoothing the crease. Then I opened the drawer, pulled out the folder where I kept tuition receipts, account statements, emails with the bursar's office, every forgotten proof with my name on it. I took the sash from the drawer that evening, unwrapped the tissue, like it was something fragile. The threads had held. I ran my finger gently over each stitch, his name, the year, the tiny owl tucked near the hem. It still looked new, though it had never been worn. I set it aside and laid it flat, pressing the creases out by hand. In the morning, I went to the department store. I didn't want anything dramatic, just something that fit well. I found a blouse, simple, soft gray, with a modest collar. It buttoned clean to the neck. I held it up in the mirror, checking for snags, then nodded to myself and took it to the register. At home, I ironed it twice. I packed the sash, then the letter from the university. The folder went in, last inside. It copies of every payment receipt I had ever filed away. Printed emails, statements, declined loan applications. Years of quiet transactions and silent choices. I wasn't sure if they'd call my name. I wasn't sure if Tomas would be there. But I would show up clean and prepared. I wasn't planning to speak unless they asked. Beatrice's name hadn't shown up anywhere in the files. Not in the bursar's ledger. Not in the FAFSA reports. Not even as an emergency contact. The university knew who had signed the checks. They just hadn't known how much I had vanished outside the margins. I tucked a pen into the folder just in case. It had been a long time since I'd stepped onto that campus in anything other than quiet. For years, I moved like someone who belonged only behind stacks and counters, who helped other people's children find their way. Now, I was coming for something else. Not revenge. Not glory. Just to take up the space I had earned. I zipped the folder closed, folded the blouse over a hanger, and placed the sash on top, like a final note in a song no one else had heard. The hall was smaller than I imagined, no grand lighting or rows of clapping strangers. Just a long room with linen-covered tables, soft music playing from speakers near the ceiling, and a podium tucked modestly to one side. It wasn't meant for spectacle. It was meant for acknowledgment. My name was on the program. I saw it right away. Second column near the bottom. Kala Rennick. Parent Contributor Award. I took my seat near the front. Someone offered me water. Someone else commented on the sash folded neatly across my lap, asking if it was handmade. I smiled, said yes, then tucked it back into my purse. When the dean stepped up to the microphone, I saw Thomas across the room. He was seated at a table near the center, his arm resting casually around Beatrice's chair. He looked relaxed, expectant. He hadn't seen me yet. He thought this night was for her. The dean spoke about legacy, about sacrifice, about the quiet work of those who never asked to be seen. My name was the last one he read. I stood when called, moving carefully toward the stage. My heels clicked lightly, each step steadier than the last. As I neared the podium, I caught Tomas's face. He didn't blink, just stared. His hand dropped from Beatrice's shoulder. She sat straighter in her seat, lips parted like she was about to speak, but didn't. I accepted the plaque without ceremony. The dean offered a handshake. I took it, nodded. I didn't turn to the crowd. I didn't look for Tomas. I didn't search the room for Beatrice. I returned to my seat with the award in hand, the sash still unopened in my purse. The next name was called, and the room moved on as if nothing had cracked open in the space between us. I folded the edge of the program, smoothed my skirt, and listened quietly as someone else took the stage. He was waiting near the walkway just past the parking lot, standing under one of the tall lights that buzzed faintly in the evening air. His jacket was wrinkled and his tie was loose. He looked younger than he had on stage, nervous, unsure, like a boy again. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. His voice wasn't angry, just tight, like he'd been holding it in all night. I stopped a few feet away. "You never asked." He blinked as if that hadn't occurred to him. I thought he rubbed his temple. "I didn't know the money came from you. Beatrice said it must have been from the school or a grant. I didn't think you had that kind of—" He trailed off. I didn't say anything. I wasn't there to correct what he thought I didn't have. She just made things easier. He continued, "Less complicated. She helped me not feel embarrassed about where I came from." "You know," I nodded slowly. I knew. I had watched it unfold, one clipped message at a time. "She was never trying to replace you," he added, though his voice faltered. I looked at him for a long moment. "I don't think she had to try." He opened his mouth again, then closed it. The wind moved lightly through the parking lot. A car door slammed in the distance. "I'd like to talk again," he said. "Really talk. Can we do that soon?" I nodded just once. "Maybe." I didn't offer a day, didn't promise anything. He stood there as I turned to walk. I didn't wait for him to follow. The sash was in my hand, not in my purse. I brushed my fingers over the stitches as I walked. The owl was right where it had always been, peeking up with steady eyes. The sidewalk stretched quiet in front of me. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. The lights behind me faded until only the sound of my own footsteps remained. The next morning, I took the watch out one more time. It still caught the light the same way. The tiny engraving on the back hadn't faded. For every hour you thought I wasn't watching, I was. I ran my thumb across the metal, then folded the velvet cover back over and placed it gently into the box. Not out of anger, not out of grief, just because it no longer felt like the moment. I tucked it back in the drawer, not hidden, just resting. Some things don't need to be given to matter. I spent the afternoon clearing out the living room. A stack of old college flyers went into the bin. I boxed up the commencement invitations I'd printed, but never sent. The posters from Tomas's freshman dorm, ones he'd never asked for me to keep, were finally rolled and recycled. There was no ache in the process, no sharp pang, just space opening up. At the community center that Tuesday, I signed up to volunteer again, basic literacy classes, a few hours a week. The coordinator remembered me. "We'd love to have you back," she said. "Some of the women still ask about your poetry sessions." I smiled and told her I'd bring the books myself. That weekend, I pulled out the same blouse I'd worn to the recognition event. I ironed it slowly, pressing out the slight fold where I'd tucked the program into my bag. In the mirror, I buttoned it to the top and stood still for a moment, just looking. No makeup, no audience, no need to explain myself. Just a woman in a blouse that fit with lines on her face that hadn't asked anyone's permission to arrive. The kettle whistled from the kitchen. I turned off the iron, folded the cloth, and reached for my bag. The folder of documents was still tucked inside receipts, records, the note from the dean. I left them there, not to prove anything, just to remind myself that it had always been true. The letter came on a Monday. Thick envelope, gold seal. I opened it with the small knife I kept by the fruit bowl. Inside was a formal announcement from the university. They were adding my name to the parent recognition wall beneath a plaque labeled Legacy Builders. It would hang in the east hallway of the Alumni Center, quiet, permanent. A name etched into the background of a place I had once only moved through on tiptoe. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside the watch. 2 days later, Thomas showed up. No call, no message. Just a knock on the door and a paper bag in his hand. He'd brought iced tea, my favorite, no sugar, with lemon slices floating near the top. We didn't talk about the ceremony, or the plaque, or the post that Beatrice had quietly taken down. Instead, he followed me outside to the garden, where the gate had been dragging against the stones. I handed him a wrench and held the wood steady while he tightened the hinge. It wasn't an apology, but it didn't feel empty either. When we finished, we stood for a moment in the late light, watching the breeze shift through the tomato vines. He dusted off his hands, then glanced through the window toward the shelf in the hallway. "The watch," he said. That, for someone I didn't rush to answer. Just followed his gaze. The box was still closed. Sitting in its usual place, the velvet slightly faded. "It's waiting for the right moment," I said. He nodded once, as if he understood something unspoken, and stepped back onto the path. I walked him to the porch. No hugs, no declarations, just a shared silence that didn't feel like distance this time. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and I stood there for a breath before turning toward the kettle. I had a class to prep for papers to sort and a plaque to visit next week.